Well, hi, Kingstowne. Happy Service and Justice Week. We are on our sixth day of this week. And as we intended from the beginning, we wanted to make sure we weren't just serving, we wanted to also be actively using our brains to engage, our hearts to engage the systems at play that place people in poverty, that cause injustice to perpetuate. And one of the things I think that's affecting our area more than other things, especially in our new location off of Telegraph Road, we know that right in the neighborhoods surrounding us, it's about 25% Hispanic and Latino people living right around that area. We actually have recently been approached by Rose Hill Elementary School to be a host site for adult ESOL. And so all of this is to say, we also, if you know Kingstowne, we've noticed our public facing events, our events at the park. We have been noticing a significant decline in the number of Latino and Hispanic persons from our community showing up. And we are assuming that might be because of a certain level of fear for large events. And so all of that, many of you have come to me asking about people you work with, your neighbors, and how are you supposed to feel? What are you supposed to think? What can we do? And so we're so excited to have Erin McKinney. She is the executive director of Just Neighbors. Just Neighbors actually is connected to the United Methodist Church. It's something that's supported on our Nova district of Virginia Conference of the United Methodist Church. And so I want to introduce her to you and let her tell you a little bit first about Just Neighbors. Hey, Erin, we're so excited that you're here. Thank you for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to do this. So just a little bit about Just Neighbors. We are celebrating our 30th year, and we literally started in the basement of a United Methodist Church, Colmore specifically, where a couple pastors and attorneys recognized they were doing an ESL class, and recognized that many of the students who were poor did not have access to an immigration attorney who could help them through the legal processes. And as a result, they launched Just Neighbors, which served exclusively Northern Virginia, and basically were helping people who couldn't afford a private attorney through to navigate the immigration legal process that applied to their particular status, if there was in fact one. And over this 30 years, it was supported initially by UMCOR, which is the United Methodist missional arm, and they liked it so well, they wanted to expand it on a national level, and that's gone through several iterations, but there's now 18 or 19 Just Neighbors-like organizations around the country that are part of the Immigration Law and Justice Network that is supported by UMCOR. So we are very deep in our Methodist roots. And while that serves us strongly, we are not limited to serving Methodist in any way, shape, or form. We have served in our 30 years probably 30,000 clients from more than 130 countries. And that's probably impacted somewhere in the number of 100 to 125,000 individuals who are members of the families of those we've served. In 2019, we expanded our footprint out beyond Northern Virginia into some rural areas of Virginia. We call them rural. They're more or less from Winchester down the I-81 corridor all the way to Waynesboro, out in Fauquier and Culpeper counties, which are kind of Northern Virginia extended these days, and the eastern shore of Virginia. And then in 2020, we actually took over our affiliate that was serving DC and Maryland. And so we also now serve that footprint. But our headquarters is here in Annandale, and you know, we are deeply embedded in the community here in Northern Virginia. So we practice humanitarian immigration law, meaning our clients are coming to the United States generally because they're escaping something, whether it's persecution, whether it's economic hardship, whether it's crime. There's a variety of things, natural disasters, wars, those kinds of things. And what that means is we don't do like employment-based immigration legal services. So you hear things like H-1B, H-2B visas, where
Hmm.
businesses actually have to petition, you have to use those visas and bring employees in. And we don't, in general, do what we call family-based, which means if I'm an immigrant who's now a US citizen or green card holder, I can petition for family members. We do family-based as it is attached to some of the other cases that we do. And those cases are typically things like DACA, when that was launched, and we continue to renew DACA statuses, special immigrant juvenile visas for unaccompanied minors, um, temporary protected status, and I'm sure we will talk more about that,
Hmm.
and things like VAWA, which is Violence Against Women's Act, so domestic violence situations, U visas for victims of crime, trafficking visas for victims of human trafficking, and then we also do things like citizenship, renewal of work permits, renewals of green cards, and so forth. Um, we do not charge our clients other than we have a $100 consultation fee that we waive more than half of the time. So most of our clients do not pay us anything. They still are obligated for fees to USCIS, the immigration services, to apply for their status. They may have to pay for physicals and medical exams and things like that. But the most they'll ever pay Just Neighbors is $100. So we function, our funding comes through individual donations, faith communities, businesses, and grants from both private foundations and governments,
Hmm.
and at both a state and local level. Um, we serve about 1,500 clients or so a year. Um, some of those clients are with us for many, many years because the backlog on so many of these cases can be 10 years. And then they have to adjust status and so forth. So we have about half of those 1,500 are carryover cases that just continue from year to year. And then we generally have 700 or 800 new clients a year. Um, in the last year and a half, we started a new process called Ask an Attorney, which is essentially a walk-in clinic. Historically, we've only taken client meetings generally when we were going to represent them or determine if we were going to represent them. And what we've seen in response to what's going on with the deportation efforts and so forth, we don't really do removal defense. But what we can do, because that really requires a level of expertise and experience that we don't have. And so we can't scale that to where we can do it efficiently. What we do extremely well are the things I already mentioned, and we can do those to scale. And those give people status if they're eligible for it. So that's our ultimate goal. But these Ask an Attorney sessions allow people to come and say, I got this notice. What does it mean? Most people who are in removal proceedings cannot afford an attorney. And quite frankly, while they should be represented, they're not likely to win because they really don't have a pathway. And so we would love everybody to be represented when they go to court. That's not realistic. But they can at least ask questions. We can educate them on what the process is going to be. We can coach them to do separation planning and be prepared in the event of, and those kinds of things. And I think last year we served over 1,000 people through those walk-in clinics in addition to the clients that we actually took. So I'm going to stop there and
So, wow, that I did not know that Just Neighbors had grown to be so um, uh, yeah, large with multiple locations now. I did not know that. And
yeah.
also, I the amount of people served is incredible. It's incredible to hear. So I so you mentioned the particular areas that you all specialize in. I what kind of unique in injustices for us to get a feeling for that? I think people know a little bit about these areas, but what are the things that you see are unique for immigrants in Northern Virginia that like general residents don't see or understand?
Yeah. Well, every day there's a new item in the news that I would consider an injustice. But one example is the ruling around temporary protected status that was specific to the Haitians and Syrian population. Um, Northern Virginia specifically doesn't have a huge Haitian population, but there's about 300,000 Haitians nationwide that have this level of protection. And temporary protected status is intended to be just that. It's a tool that's given that if there's a natural disaster or a war, and there are people in the United States when that event happens, that temporary protected status can be provided so that you're not forcing somebody to return to a situation that may not have been there when they left. And the initial Haitian one, for example, was with the earthquake in 2013. And the devastation was so broad, it would have been inhumane to ask people, whether they were documented or not, to return to Haiti. And those determinations are usually reviewed every 18 to 24 months. And for a variety of reasons, they have been extended. TPS for El Salvador, I think, has been in place since 2001. For Honduras and Guatemala, I think, since 1999. So there are people who have been here for 10 or 20 or 25 years under those statuses that the government, and this is administrations from both parties, over those periods of time, have continued to renew. Now, you could argue that Hurricane Mitch, that may have happened in the late 90s, early 2000s, is no longer the cause, but there's other things
Right.
that may be happening in those countries that warranted continuation of TPS. Haiti is a great example of that. There's barely a functioning government in Haiti. I've been to Haiti, I think, 3 times on mission trips with the United Methodist Church, and it is the poorest place I've ever seen in the world. And under the best of conditions is just not good. But there's barely a functioning government. There is basically warfare in the street between rivals who are trying to control, and the gangs and all of these kinds of things. So as a Christian and as a human being, I question how you could say it's safe to send people back. Does the government have a right to stop TPS? The Supreme Court said yes, they do. Because the condition in which TPS was established was the earthquake in 2013. Could the government take a step to establish a new TPS, given the current conditions? Certainly. Are they likely to do that? No. So think about what happens to an individual when they're here for 10, 12 years, and they have a legal right to work because TPS gives you a work permit. Many of those people are now fully employed. Many of them have US born children
Right.
who are US citizens. Some of them have married US citizens and may have a pathway to a permanent status through that. A child, US citizen child, can petition for their parent when they turn 21. So there's longer term ways that people who are on temporary status may be able to get permanent status. But for most of the Haitians who are on TPS, they probably have no other legal pathway. So with the termination, they are deportable. They are undocumented and are subject to deportation. What this means is that we have nursing homes, senior living environments, many businesses that these folks are working at. And you've even seen the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, that was accused, that came
Right.
up in the election about the Haitians eating cats and dogs, which was totally untrue, say this is going to impact our community financially
Right.
if you deport all of the Haitians who are living here. Um, and in this area, the larger populations that would be affected by termination of TPS for other countries would be um, Salvadorans, because we
Yeah.
have a huge population of Salvadorans, specifically in Northern Virginia. The Eastern Shore has a number of Haitians. Um, so it depends on the geography of what the impact of this is going to be. But it's inhumane. Haiti in particular, you could argue some other countries have come out of the situations, but Haiti's one that's just mind-blowing to me that that you could argue it's safe to send anybody there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in most of these cases, if it was natural disaster, spurring it on, it's a it's the aftermath of natural disaster becomes ripe for uh, corruption and
Absolutely.
the move-in of gangs
Yeah.
and the warfare in the street and all that stuff. So like it's only it only gets worse. It's not just about buildings collapsing. It's about whole communities collapsing. So
You're right.
yeah, gosh, yeah, we have multiple people in our congregation who have voiced that significant portion of the people who work for them in um, wastewater treatment is one that was spoken directly to me, are Salvadorian, and they feel like, what do we do? Like, and what would you say as I know you all said you don't practice law relate like employment law, and this is more TPS, but like, and the government can do this, that they were allowed to. They can suspend it. They can, but are what would you suggest for someone who's worried on behalf of people they know, people they can vouch for? Like, what would you say to them? Like, what should they do?
I honestly think the people who could have the most influence over this administration are business owners.
Mm,
I think it's inherent that as business owners, particularly if you're employing immigrants,
mm,
um, that you get to this administration and say, you're going to shut down my business. You're going to significantly impact the economy
mm,
by deporting all of these people because I have tried to hire American citizens
right,
and they will not do this work.
right,
And you are going to economically undermine the country if you try to remove 11 million, 14 million, whatever the magic number is now, undocumented residents of this country, because they are doing the work that US citizens don't want to do. They're in the meat processing plants. They're shucking crabs or picking crabs on the Eastern Shore. They're in the fields picking our fruits and vegetables. Um, they are in the nursing homes. They are in, they're changing our parents' diapers. They're doing the dirty work in this country. Um,
yeah,
construction, um, as America's economy has grown and has become more white collar, there are fewer people interested in doing blue collar work, what has been historically blue collar work. And that has historically been done by immigrants. They were just white immigrants coming from Western Europe. And the difference now is they're coming from Central and South America and Africa and Asia. So they don't fit the white Anglo-Saxon profile that many people still believe America is, and it has never been. Um, and so, you know, I mean, we dealt with that until 1865 by importing slaves. We imported the Chinese to help build our railroads. Our first immigration law was the Chinese Exclusion Act, which literally intended to send them all back to China. So come do our work and then go home has
Right.
really been the message of immigration law in our nation. Um, but we have to recognize that this nation was built on the backs of immigrants, starting from Western Europe, the slaves, and now many people from other parts of the world. And so um, I do think businesses have an accountability to remind this administration that. And so that's one thing I think businesses can do. Um, I think the other thing they can do is check in with their employees. I I make no judgments on who people hire and how they go about doing that. Um, there are many Salvadorans who have documentation. There are many who have been here and are under that TPS. If they came, and the way TPS works is you have to be here when it is established. It's not like if you came after the fact that you would be eligible for TPS. Um,
Mhm.
and the problem is there are not legal pathways for most of those people. If they came after TPS was established, they're not eligible for that. They might
Wow.
be eligible for DACA. They might have been eligible for DACA. There's no new DACA. They may have become eligible for something else, but because there is TPS for El Salvador doesn't mean anybody who has come in after the fact has access to it. Um, so the reality is there are a lot of people working in our economy, paying taxes, excuse me, and contributing in many ways that do not have legal pathways and are subject to deportation with or without TPS. You know, if TPS goes away, there's several 100,000 people directly impacted by that. There's many more from El Salvador that don't even have TPS, so they have no protection. And they're working in our economy. So I
Right.
think, there's many people who just want to believe that we can remove all these people and everything will be fine. And that is not the case.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously that's one of the myths. I'm not sure if that's even a myth, but just it's a politicized a falsehood, just complete
Yeah.
falsehood. But and what you were saying about, there are people from who will do jobs here that we cannot find people to do these
Right.
jobs. And I will say that's where I think I notice this. I think we are led to believe that the topic of immigration is so partisan, and that nobody agrees on anything. I think that's where it breaks down because I mean I know people in my own family who are um, uh, pro Trump policies, pro this administration's particular a stance on immigration, and also are live and work around the orange groves in Florida, and it breaks down real fast when you real and they don't they well, that's not what I want. This is not what I wanted. What I don't want is for my entire base of employees to cease to exist because I don't know where to find them. Where else do you find them? I have no idea. So like I think we are trying to be convinced by politicians are trying to convince us that we just are on two separate sides. I think people actually see much more eye to eye on this than they like to lead us to believe.
Yeah, I mean it was stunning in the last election, presidential election, how many immigrants voted for this administration and are all now going,
Hmm.
wait a second, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and you know, everybody wants to identify the good immigrants,
Right.
and we want, and I mean, one of the biggest myths that this administration perpetuates is that there is this surplus of violent criminals. And
Mm-hmm.
the Department of Justice's own data
Right.
substantiates that immigrants commit violent crimes at a significantly lower rate than US citizens.
Right.
Um, are there some? Absolutely. But it is a much lower percentage than the same crimes perpetrated by US citizens. And nobody wants to believe that because and they want to believe that everybody who crossed the border without documentation is a criminal. And that's not even true. For most people, it's a civil offense, which is essentially like getting a traffic ticket. So if that's the definition of a criminal, I'm one because I've gotten a traffic ticket. That's a civil offense. Um, and unless you made multiple illegal entries, which can become a felony or misdemeanor, most people don't, many of the people, particularly the people who've been here for many, many years, were never charged with anything.
Right.
Um, and
Mm.
so there's this perpetuation of they're all criminals, and then how you define criminal and violent criminal versus somebody who walked through an unguarded border, um, who has lived here for 25 years as good as any American citizen could ever want to be, who has worked, who has contributed, has paid taxes, who has done all the right things, and quite frankly isn't eligible to benefit from anything that you and I get to benefit from, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid. They'll pay into Social Security, but they don't get it. All of those kinds of things. I saw a statistic, and it's probably even much more than this now. At one point, undocumented immigrants paid almost $16 billion into the Social Security funds.
Wow.
16 billion with a B. They will never see a dollar of that.
Wow.
So it's the system's broken.
Yeah.
Um, we have needed comprehensive immigration reform for years. The last time there was any major look at this was under Reagan in the 80s, where he offered amnesty to about 4 million undocumented immigrants. There's a variety of reasons why people have continued to immigrate to the United States, and many are economic. Um, Many have been disasters, and many have been of our own doing by our policies and practices in these countries, that cause disruption, to the economies in those countries.
Wow.
Undermining rice prices in Haiti caused a lot of people to leave Haiti because they were able to be self-sustaining farmers. And when we undercut the rice prices, it no longer made sense for them to grow their own. You know, some of our policies in terms of production and trade with Central and America, caused
Mm.
things to change economically. Who we have supported with weapons and things like that. El Salvador, a perfect example. Nicaragua, some of these other places, um,
Mm.
in the name of preventing communism, um, have also created these situations. And honestly, if you look at the Bible is a book of immigration.
Right.
Um, from Adam and Eve getting kicked out of the garden,
Mm-hmm.
they're now they're now immigrants. They got to find a new place to live. Abraham told to move elsewhere. Jesus was a asylee when he fled Herod to Egypt. And those kinds of things. And you look, Moses was an unaccompanied child. He was put in the river hoping somebody else would take care of him because otherwise he would have been killed.
Right.
Um, and so, and the Bible, from a Christian standpoint, the Bible's very clear on how we are supposed to treat
Yeah.
immigrants.
There is no debate on that, and
There's no,
it's fascinating that
it,
there's a
it,
lot of things you could give another there's another scripture out there for though. Well, but let's pay attention to this one. There's
yeah,
nothing.
nothing.
It's super
It's
clear.
yeah. So, migration, I've seen some data that says 3% of the world is in a constant state of migration and has
Mm.
always been.
Wow.
Um, which is a fascinating figure considering we're now at a population of about 8 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So if 3% of the population of 8 billion people are constantly moving,
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
That's a huge number.
And so how do you manage that? I mean, we saw just last week what happened between Morocco and Spain on these borders, and it can be overwhelming, and there are economic impacts. You can sympathize with the people on the Texas side of the border when hundreds and thousands of people cross in one single time, and faith communities and everybody else are trying to reach out and help them. But you have to get underneath it and say, what's causing this? Why? And I honestly believe nobody wants to leave their home when they can't go back. They can't go back for the birth of their child. They can't go back for the funeral for their parent. They can't go back for the wedding of a cousin. They can't. If they're choosing to be here and come where they're trying to make a better life for the people they've left behind, but that person can't go back without the
Right.
risk of not being able to continue. They sacrifice a lot. And I don't think people generally are going to do that unless they have no hope for any alternative. Go to a country where you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture, you're not going to get supported, you're going to be discriminated against, you got to find a place to live, you're going to have to beg for work,
Hmm.
and then you're going to try to send money back to your family to help them have a better life. Um, that's a big decision to make. And I just don't think I would make that decision unless I had no other hope. Um, and I think, when we humanize instead of dehumanizing immigrants and think about why they came, and you sit down and you can think of our own ancestors. My ancestors probably left Ireland because of the potato famine.
Hmm. Right.
Um, Climate change is affecting people in Central America, particularly the indigenous people. All of these things contribute, and we want to have short memories and say, yeah, but, and it's like, there's no, yeah, but. It's
Mhm.
just people move. There are people who move truly for opportunity. There's no question about it. But the vast majority of people that we're talking about left because they had relatively little option where they were,
Yeah.
whether they were being bombed in the Middle East or Ukraine or Afghanistan or wherever, or, their whole society collapsed because of a major earthquake or a hurricane,
Right.
whatever, or persecuting governments, or, you know, ripping people off and eliminating opportunities. There's so many reasons. Some are just so much more subtle than others.
Yeah.
And so
I
you try
know
to remember why people immigrate, and that helps.
exactly. I was thinking, Aaron, you just said, it changes things when it's personal, when you know
Yeah,
someone.
absolutely.
And I mean, I think that's the heart of the people in my congregation. Like, I rely on these people. I love these people. Like, they've been working for me, and gosh, I I can't imagine them not being here doing
Right.
this job and being a part of the ecosystem of this workplace. Like, it changes. Well, I mean, even if your politics was pro-immigration, it still changes your energy behind it, even when you know
Absolutely.
somebody. I don't know if you have any story that you may want to share that can give us a picture. And that, I guess, that's, as we kind of wrap things up, two main things. Like, if there was any stories you wanted to share, and then I would love to ask the ending questions of, what does the church do, right? Like, where could the
Yeah.
church be? So, but yeah, I'll leave that to you.
Um, there's an endless number of stories. One specific one is and this is just indicative of the times. Woman came, her husband, I'm not sure if he was a U.S. citizen or green card holder, but brought his wife, and he was abusing her, and he was holding her status over her. This is where VAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act, comes in. And she has a legitimate case to file which would allow her, because her status is dependent on her US citizen spouse, to
Mm.
petition for her, which he can legally do. And if they have a legitimate marriage for 2 years or more, she is eligible for a green card. He's abusive and he holds that status. And this happens. I can't tell you how many clients we've had this happen to. And it's not just men holding it over women. It's both, goes both ways.
Mm.
Um, but they'll take their passport. They'll basically make them a prisoner to this status. And so this client finally came to us. And I'm not sure if it came with referral from a social worker or whatever, but we looked at her case and said, yes, you qualify for this status. And she is so afraid of this administration and does not want to give any of her information to the government that she is not applying. She's not applying yet. She is literally afraid to apply for a status that's going to prevent her from getting deported. She's got the case. She's got, you know, and and that's the reality we're living in. This fear factor is so strong. And so she's basically conceding, to the best of my knowledge. I'm not sure if she's still living with the husband or if she's gotten out of the situation, but
Oh, oh.
you're conceding living in an undocumented status when you have a legal pathway because the fear of the government is so much bigger. At the same time, we serve unaccompanied children, which we, until last week, had a federal contract. You may have seen all the news about this.
Mm.
Um, we were representing kids who had been released from ORR, from Office of Refugee Resettlement, kids who came without a
Yeah,
parent,
yes.
um,
Uh-huh.
placed with somebody, and it could be a family member, it could be one of the parents, but they're typically, one of the options for them is if they have been abused, abandoned, or neglected by one or both parents,
Mm.
they could be eligible for a special immigrant juvenile visa. That requires us to take them to family court to get a predicate order from a family court judge that says, yes, you've been abused, neglected, or abandoned by one or both of your parents, and it would do harm to send you back to your country.
Mhm.
So the family judge rules on that, which then we can apply for them for a special immigrant juvenile visa. Now, the backlog on those is about 4 years. So they can get a work permit if they're old enough, but this can also apply to a 6-month-old. But they can get a work permit in the interim. When the visa becomes available, which is about 4 years, then it actually gives them a pathway to a green card and then citizenship. This administration is now saying that's not enough to allow you to stay here to wait 4 years for that visa. We're going to go ahead and deport you. And so now we're having to see if they can file an asylum claim. And asylum requires persecution and fear, a credible fear, which could be you have to be part of a social group or politically persecuted. Well, these are kids. And their fear may be legitimate for gangs or whatever, which may not be considered a viable group. But in working with the kids and trying to understand their fear, sometimes they're having to like come out. Like we had a client the other day who finally admitted he was gay to his attorney. And so because he knows going back to his country, he might not live. Um, and so, that he may have a defensible asylum case, but asylum cases maybe win 15% of the time, even if you have a strong case. So it's just, there's this brutality going on for
Right,
people who
right.
have legitimate legal pathways that the way this administration is operating either cause more trauma or because of fear will not let them move forward.
It's
So,
heartbreaking. Oh. So, we, as a church, anytime I pull our congregation about what's next for us, Where should we be lending our hearts and our hands? Where what should we be caring about? Um, Immigrants, refugees come to the top of the list every time. I have been in connection with like Lutherans, Lutheran, is it family services or social services, whatever
Social services.
services? Yes. So been in connection with them. I've been on, and it, it can be even on those lists, it can be overwhelming the amount of requests
Yeah.
for help, and also so fast that you can't even like it's hard to even like put our hands to work before someone else is like it, I haven't really figured out yet like where
Yeah.
is it that we as the church can respond to the
Yeah.
needs right in our community. And so
Yeah.
I yeah, and I guess what are the I guess there's a couple of questions. What are the mistakes that churches have made, or the assumptions churches have made that's needed, that's not needed, or and but where do we begin? Where do we begin from someone from your perspective, especially when legal is under this administration is uh, just the main concern of so many people now.
Right.
It is
I,
status is the main concern. Yeah.
yeah. So I kind of when I talk to churches, I kind of talk about three different areas: donate, educate, and advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So you can donate to organizations like Just Neighbors, and there's many others who do enable people who can't afford a private attorney, if they have a legal pathway, to pursue that. So that's one. You can also, from a funding standpoint, what's happening now with deportation is so many families are mixed status, meaning you've got somebody that's undocumented and somebody or somebodies who are US citizens. Often it's the breadwinner who gets deported. And now you've got a family of US citizens who's staying here who doesn't have a financial means to support themselves, whether it's their housing and those kinds of things. And and typically what happens is people say, "Oh, well, we can give you a month's rent." Well, it's not a month problem. It's a
Mm-hmm.
year or maybe 2 or 3 year problem to get on their feet, because it may be that the spouse was staying home because they can't afford childcare, and they've got children in school and those kinds of things. So it takes a while when you lose your primary breadwinner to get back on your feet. So it could be adopting a family like that and making a commitment to the longer term and helping them. If somebody in the family can work, getting them the training or helping them get a job or helping provide childcare or transportation, and all of those barriers that may exist for a family when somebody in the family's been deported. And there's organizations, and Lutheran Social Services may be one of those, I'm not sure, but there are different organizations, or you may just know a family in the neighborhood that's
Right.
happened to. The school is probably another potential partner in identifying those kinds of families. So that could be something you could gather around.
Great. Thank you.
Um, I think education, just really getting an understanding of immigration law, not to become an immigration attorney, but to kind of weed through the rhetoric around this, and understanding that, yes, I can petition for my married brother from Mexico, but the wait for that visa is 24 years. So this whole chain migration is
Yeah.
baloney. Yeah, yes, I could have my quote anchor baby, but that child cannot petition for me for 21 years. So, so when we do an Immigration 101, we go through the different types of humanitarian cases that we take, the ones we've talked about today, explain what the law is, explain what the implications are. And so it just gives you a better grounding when you hear some of this stuff going, wait, that's not actually true. So I strongly encourage congregations and groups to really get educated on immigration issues. We can also do presentations on kind of the hot topics of the stuff that's going on that you see
Right.
in the newspaper every day, as another means of education.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and then
I do
advocacy.
appreciate that because I think that churches, I think I wouldn't have thought I would have thought that that was something we host. It would that would be something that a church might host for the community that needs to learn it. But what I'm hearing you say is no, you, the church, whoever you are, educate yourselves, and that I think is yeah. Thank you for that because I don't know if I would have thought to do that necessarily,
I,
but yeah, we are responsible
because
for showing this as well. Yeah,
yeah, and I'm the first to admit, before I started working here, I wouldn't have known any of this stuff
right.
and or understood the impact of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the third leg of what I advise is advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be educated to
Right.
advocate. And so, you know, when you hear things like the anchor baby or or chain migration or they're all criminals and you don't have any data to refute that, it's really hard to advocate and say, wait a second. Um, when you don't understand, so I think having that education is foundational into really getting past so much of the rhetoric. Um, that then allows you to go, okay, how do I want to respond to this? And, I mention this often, and as we talked about earlier, if you're a business owner, think about the economic impacts it has to you. And if not directly to you, to maybe the people you work with or work for. Um, and put yourself in those situations. And I don't think you can do that without understanding a bit more. You don't need to become an expert, but you need to have a good foundation and understanding what's actually happening. I think the advocacy is huge because we are clearly split as a nation. And I don't think this administration is going to listen in general. But I do think they hear business voices a lot more than they hear individuals because that's what they're oriented to.
Right.
And so I think, and we've seen this to some extent. In fact, I was talking to a donor yesterday who lives in Goodwin House, and he said, "Yeah, our CEO came in the other day, and we were asking him about this, and he
Mm-hmm.
said he has been advocating." And they said, "Well, what about your peers who also run all of these?" And he was kind of like non-answering on this. And so I really think it's imperative that business people articulate the financial and economic impacts that this whole deportation strategy is going to have, not only on their individual businesses, but the impacts of that on the economy as a whole.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who just want to put their fingers in the air and deny that, but it's a reality. And I think if anybody can get the ear of this administration, it's business people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
you know,
we've seen that. There have been moments
yeah,
where push pause. There's been a pause on certain
right.
decisions related to that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they backed off of some of the enforcement in the farmers' fields,
exactly.
and some of the other places. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Um, Gosh, this has been so good. Thank you so much. Is there any final comment you want to make? Anything? We're going to be viewing this on demand, but wanting to engage with it ongoing. And so I do think one of the first steps we'll do is a immigration 101.
Yeah.
And invite somebody to do that in person. That would be amazing. But anything else you'd like to share? Thank you so much, Aaron. Thank you. But anything
You're
else?
you're you're absolutely welcome, and I appreciate the opportunity. I think the big thing is pay attention. It's there. There's so many issues right now that are in front of everybody, that we all tend to feel overwhelmed as to which battle we want to fight. And you have to pick a battle. Well, you don't have to, but you should pick a battle. But I think the most important thing is that we recognize the humanity of our immigrant neighbors, and nothing has changed about them prior to November of 24. They're the same human beings. They're the same people that have been in our communities for many years, who've been contributing. Um, their status hasn't changed, as you know, however you want to define that. Um, it's a lot easier to point them out. And honestly, if we look at what's happening with ICE and and we think about how they're targeting based on color, based on the
Yep.
language you're speaking, based on where you work, and they're authorized to target that way. American citizens
Yeah.
are getting detained
Yes.
because they look or sound or work where illegal immigrants work. Um, I think you have to ask ourselves, are we okay with this?
Right.
Are we really? I certainly, as Christians, we have to ask ourselves, are we okay with this? But culturally and as a country, is this really okay?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm afraid too many people are saying yes. And so for
Or
those,
gotten so exhausted by the cycle that they have.
they can't even ask the question.
It's the turning off. It's the turning off thing, and the
Yeah,
what should I be getting outraged about, and what should I, what, and what not, and
it's outrage fatigue, quite honestly.
it's
Yeah,
absolutely outreach fatigue. It's news, all of that, and it happens. It comes in a cycle. The closer you get to the midterms, the more people, and then it rises back up as people.
yeah,
Unfortunate that's the way it is. I do think that what you were. I think I know a lot of Christians know this is not as it should be. This is not what God wants. This is not the kingdom of God, and yet it is. There's a lot of a lot of like, what are you going to do about it? And what I hear from you is part of that immigration 101 is, what do you do? Well, you don't know what to do about it until you know what's happening, what it's
right.
about, what this means. And so, once you know, and then you meet someone, and it changes things. It
It
changes,
changes
especially if
things.
you know that what they are being told by someone else is not true. Oh my gosh, can I connect you with the right person? Can I help? Yeah.
Right.
So it it
Yeah.
um it gives you agency when you know something. And I
Yeah.
feel like people just,
Yeah.
we are so tired, and a lot of it is just the sitting back. What are you going to do? What you gonna
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
One of the biggest myths is, well, why don't these people come legally and get in line? There is no line.
There's no
There
line.
is no line to get in to come legally. And quite frankly, this administration is shutting down even the very few that exist for employment and a lot of the other things. So that's one of the myths. And I hear people say it all the time. I don't mind them if they come legally.
We don't know what we mean when we say these things. We don't
Yeah,
know. We don't know what we
right.
mean.
And,
Yeah.
and yeah, which is why the education piece is so important.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I even when you hear on the news that ICE detained someone that they weren't looking for, that wasn't actually a criminal, or wasn't had violent crimes, but or was here legally, right? Like that's the other thing. But
Yeah.
people, what I've heard from folks is, well, still they came into the country illegally. You don't know that. I don't think you even know that they could also be legal. Like, we don't even know
They've
what any of these
arrested
words mean. We don't know what any of these words, like,
they've
so
arrested people here on tourist visas.
yeah, yeah,
They're looking, they're looking at people's social media to determine if, they should be allowed to stay. And so many of the freedoms that we all claim are really being tested because our Constitution doesn't just protect United States citizens. It protects everybody who is standing physically in the United States.
yeah,
And I think there's a great misunderstanding about things like due process. Due process, everybody in the United States is entitled to due process. The difference for immigrants, if an immigrant commits a crime, they're entitled to legal representation, just like if I committed a crime and I couldn't afford an attorney, I'm going to get an appointed attorney. An immigrant's eligible for that as well. What an immigrant is not automatically eligible is for representation around their immigration status.
right,
That's not guaranteed.
yeah, yeah. Well, so we have so much more to learn and so much
Yeah.
more to pray about, and get to work, educating ourselves so that we can be better advocates. Thank you for beginning that process for us, Erin. We're so
My
grateful.
pleasure.
And we'll be in touch about how Kingstowne can connect better with just neighbors. We'll talk to you soon. Yeah.
Thank you.